Hi and welcome to another presentation from your business tutor, learning your way, anytime, anywhere. To support a smooth functioning organisation, most businesses will develop a set of company policies which outline the rules and procedures everyone must follow when at work. Although such policies cover a vast range of areas, in this presentation we will focus on an organisation's human resource policies. So what are we going to learn in this presentation? Well, first of all, we're going to find out about the features of organisational human resource policies, and then we're going to explore the impact of those human resource policies on an organisation. In most organisations, human resource policies are developed as a way of ensuring all staff are treated fairly, openly and within the law so that employee relations are not negatively affected. So with that point made, let's turn to look at what a grievance policy is. A grievance policy is a document which outlines how an employee can make a complaint about something that has happened in the workplace. For example, if they feel a colleague's behaviour has been aggressive towards them, or if they have been forced to carry out duties not detailed in their job description. Although a grievance can be raised at any time by an employee, most organisations will hope that a manager or supervisor will be able to resolve any minor issues an employee has, meaning a grievance will not need to be made. However, if the matter cannot be resolved, or if it is of a serious nature, an employee should complete a grievance form outlining their complaint and then send it to the Human Resources Department, which will then undertake an investigation. In some instances, this will be as simple as speaking to both sides in the complaint so that an amicable outcome can be reached. Whereas in other circumstances, it may involve an extensive investigation with multiple interviews, after which the HR department will produce a report on its findings, detailing any action, if any, which should be taken. For example, if evidence is found to support the grievance, an HR department may recommend that disciplinary action is taken. Whereas, if no evidence is found, the grievance will be dismissed. Of course, should the employee making the grievance be unhappy with the outcome of the grievance investigation, they can take further action by making a claim to an ACAS employment tribunal to investigate the matter further. Okay, let's now turn to a policy which can follow after a grievance has been upheld by asking, what is a discipline policy? A discipline policy is a document which outlines how an employee will be dealt with and what action will be taken against them should their behaviour fall below what is expected, or should they break a company rule. For example, discipline procedures would be used if an employee hit another colleague, or if a member of staff did not follow health and safety policy. As you might expect, any action taken against a member of staff should only occur after a thorough investigation has taken place, and should be appropriate to the offence. For example, if only a minor issue has occurred, an employee may only receive a verbal warning. Whereas, if the offence is serious, the member of staff could be dismissed from their job. What this shows is that an organisation's discipline procedure has multiple sanctions, including a verbal warning, a written warning, a final written warning, and lastly, dismissal. In fact, in certain situations, additional action may also be included in the policy, such as suspension without pay for a fixed period of time, demotion to a lower paid job, or informing the police if the member of staff has allegedly committed a crime. However, and this is a really important point, when action is taken against a member of staff, an employee must have a right to appeal if they feel the discipline investigation treated them unfairly or certain issues were not looked into during their investigation. This is a crucial point because what this emphasises is that an organisation must follow its disciplinary procedures accurately, meaning any decision made must be based on hard evidence rather than opinion or feelings. If not, an employee will have strong grounds for an appeal and may in fact be able to take their employer to an ACAS employment tribunal for unfair treatment or unfair dismissal. In the end, however, any disciplinary action, except in the case of dismissal, should always be taken with the aim of supporting the member of staff to improve their behaviour, attitude or performance, so that further action isn't necessary. Okay, let's now look at what an organisation's absenteeism policy may involve. An organisation will have an absenteeism policy to deal with all the situations where staff are absent from work, for example, due to illness, family commitments or personal issues. Within the policy, there will be procedures which both the employer and employee have to follow when absence occurs. For example, to request an absence to attend a family wedding on a working day, an employee would have to put in a request form for approval, which their employer would either grant or reject based on the contents of the absenteeism policy. Whereas for an absence due to illness, an employee would have to notify their supervisor as soon as possible with details of their illness and an expected date of return. In each case, the employer will record details of the absence so that an employee's attendance record can be tracked. This is important because keeping a note will allow a business to identify if an employee's attendance is a problem and requires further investigation and potentially supportive measures put in place. But also, if they have already received their discretionary absence entitlement to attend family events, for example, and therefore should have future requests turned down. Of course, as well as outlining procedures for dealing with short-term absence, an absenteeism policy will also detail how long-term absences will be dealt with as well. For example, the policy will detail what documentation an employee has to provide, such as a doctor's note to verify their absence, but also will specify over what time period an employee is entitled to full pay while absent before moving on to half and then no pay. And finally, what support measures are in place to help an employee return to work, such as a visit from an occupational health professional to discuss any issues at work that may be causing the absence and how they might be resolved, or alternatively, putting in place a phased return so that the employee is not overwhelmed when they return to work. As can be seen, the aim of an absenteeism policy should be to ensure everyone is treated fairly and to encourage high levels of attendance amongst all staff, but also support those that are having difficulties. However, if it is found an employee has taken unauthorised absence or there is no legitimate reason for their absence, supportive action may be replaced with disciplinary procedures instead. Okay, let's now find out what an organisation's redundancy policy may involve. An organisation's redundancy policy will detail all the procedures that must be followed when a business intends to lay staff off. This will include making staff aware that job losses are to be expected, contacting specific members of staff whose jobs are at risk, as well as requesting if there are any members of staff who want to take voluntary redundancy. Obviously, given the delicate nature of making people redundant, it is absolutely vital that each stage in the process is dealt with sensitively and that staff are kept fully informed throughout the process. This could mean making counsellors available for those whose jobs are at risk, or giving staff details of what payments they could expect to receive if they took voluntary redundancy. However, and perhaps more importantly, the redundancy process must be fair and above board so that the organisation does not receive bad publicity. As such, there should be clear processes in place that indicate which workers will be made compulsory redundant if not enough people volunteer, for example, those with the least time served, as well as details of the notice period and payments those losing their job will receive. Okay, let's now turn to the final human resource policy we'll look at and ask, what is a dismissal policy. A dismissal policy outlines how and under what circumstances a business can terminate an employee's contract. Usually, the decision to terminate an employee's contract will be made after an organisation has followed its disciplinary procedures fully and there has been no improvement in the member of staff's behaviour, attendance or performance. However, in some serious circumstances, such as punching a customer in the face, an employee may be dismissed on the spot for gross misconduct. Whichever approach is used, it is very important that when dismissing an employee that it is done fairly and reasonably, in so much that an organisation must be able to show that it has a legitimate reason for the dismissal and that their organisational procedures and policies were followed correctly and impartially. For example, by giving the employee notice period before dismissing them. If this is not the case, the employee will have an argument for unfair, constructive or wrongful dismissal, which means they will be able to take their employer to an employment tribunal, and if the case is found in the employee's favour, they could be reinstated in their job and receive compensation. Of course, if an employee has been dismissed fairly and reasonably, there will be a process in place to ensure the employee returns all company property, such as uniforms and keys, and that any access they had to computer systems are removed. It is clear to see that organisational human resource policies have a big influence on how an employer treats its employees. So with that, let's explore that in more detail by asking, what is the impact of organisational human resource policies on employee relations? The first impression most people have is that organisational human resource policies must have a negative impact on employee relations because they are in place to deal with situations where an employee's behaviour, attitude or actions have fallen below the expected standard. However, this could not be further from the truth. Because as was emphasised earlier, the aim of most policies is to first address issues, but then support improvement so that further action is not required. Obviously, this focus on support is good for employee relations, as it shows that even when an employee is in a bad situation, their employer still values them enough to help their improvement. More than that though, and this is at the heart of it, effective employee relations must be based on the principles of fairness and respect for all. Given HR policies are not only about making sure an organisation meets its obligations in terms of the law, such as the Equality Act, but also ensuring that in any given circumstance every employee is treated in the same way, according to the same set of rules. It is clear to see how they defend positive employee relations. In fact, just having HR policies in place can help to support positive employee relations, as they create a framework of standards that all employees know they must meet in terms of their behaviour and actions. This is important because if employees know at the outset what the expectations are, they are less likely to breach them, meaning fewer staffing issues will arise. Of course, this is likely to be even more effective if staff or their trade union representatives have been involved in creating and setting the HR policies. This is because consulting with staff over HR rules and procedures is far more likely to get staff buy-in and commitment, meaning should they have to be used, staff will accept the outcome rather than fighting against it using disruptive industrial action. And finally, on the positive side, HR policies allow an organisation to dismiss staff in a fair and evidence-based way who are disrupting the workplace through their behaviour and actions. This can be really important for employee relations, as one bad employee can have a massively negative impact on the atmosphere and culture within an organisation. However, HR policies can also have a negative impact on employee relations, especially if they are used in an overzealous way to control and coerce staff into compliance. If this is the case, the organisation is likely to suffer with low staff retention and reduced productivity due to lower motivation. Equally, If an organisation applies its HR policies in an unfair or insensitive way, staff will lose trust in their employer. In fact, if this is the case, an employee may even take their employer to an employment tribunal, where the organisation may not only be fined, but also receive negative press coverage. Okay, so what did we learn in this presentation? Well, first of all, we found out about the features of organisational human resource policies, and then we went on to explore the impact of those human resource policies on organisations. Organisational HR policies clearly have an important role to play in maintaining strong and positive employee relations. The framework they create, however, is only effective if the rules and procedures outlined in each policy are applied consistently, fairly and sensitively. It is therefore vital that those applying such policies are given training on how to do this effectively, and that the policies are used in line with ACAS best practice.